Thank you very much. It's really a great pleasure to be here, and I'm going to tell you about something that we do at Algorithmiq, but actually probably I will focus more on questions than on answer, or maybe both. So one of the key sentences I want to begin with is that it takes more than cool hardware and clever algorithms to make quantum computers useful. What does this mean? How can we actually integrate not only these two factors, but also everything which is empirically needed to extract useful and impactful use cases for, in our case, at Algorithmiq, specifically healthcare and life sciences. And if we think about the quantum computing paradigm, we all know that if we are here is because quantum computers integrated with classical computer promise to be the next exponential technology for computing. And given our society, this clearly will have a profound impact at all levels and for very many applications. So if you think in terms of a startup like us, we do have several pillars. We do R&D and we productize. We have a business, we grow our team, and all this is interconnected and is also interconnected with the timing. We have to have the timing right for all of these things to happen together. And maybe if we reflect for a moment to what it means to have a quantum computer that operates at quantum advantage, this is precisely the direction, the milestones that we want to go towards, and the milestones that today is considered one of the key inflection points. I will distinguish two quantum advantage points. One is a scientific quantum advantage, and the other one is more commercial quantum advantage or industrially relevant quantum advantage. And we are focusing at Algorithmiq on developing algorithms and software that allow to reach both of them. And precisely what are the questions that we have to ask to make this possible, because clearly these inflection points will drive the business as well. And I promised you questions, and here I have a list of them. And really, I think that what everyone is asking at the moment, I'm talking about industry leaders, I'm talking about policymakers, I'm talking about investors in our case, is what is the actual level of maturity of quantum computers? And there are many ways of formulating these questions, but if you look at the last one of the perhaps more provocative questions is quantum computing a research field, an emerging industry, or already now a disruptive platform? And this is the questions that I would like you to have in the back of your mind as I present some of the use cases that we examine. But in fact, I would argue that an even more, let's say, subtle question at this stage is who truly owns the answer to this question? So who actually knows which is the level of maturity of quantum technology today? And of course, perhaps you can say you cannot have an exact answer, but who is closest to know how close we are to scientific and commercial quantum advantage? Okay? And what does this tell us? Again, I show again this slide because I want to focus on the scientific and commercial aspects, and I will continue when it comes to R&D and product to two more questions. The first one is, what are the key blockers to quantum advantage now and in the future, in the fault-tolerant era? And the reason why I ask this question is that the way in which we operated at Algorithmiq since the very beginning is a way in which we did research and productize what we think are the answer or the enabling algorithms to remove these blockers. Because this is exactly what will enable to operate a technology which is truly disruptive. So this is, since 5 years of existence, we are working on it. And then, of course, the other important question is, what are the key use cases? What are the applications? What are the verticals that will be most impacted by such a technology? So let me now focus for a moment on simulations of materials and chemical compounds, and I will describe later on an application in healthcare and life sciences. So one of the questions refined now for near-term and fault-tolerant quantum computing is really what are the key blockers in near-term and in fault-tolerant. And some of them are very common to everyone, okay? I want to point out some blockers that are less common, and hence some algorithms that are perhaps have been, let's say, underestimated in their importance, okay? Everyone knows that one of the blockers is noise and errors, right? So this is what we have been discussing in many talks before. Error mitigation, error corrections are obviously enabling technology because they remove noise and errors. But another important point is that quantum computing, very often for simulating chemistry and materials for sure, they operate as a statistical machines. So you need to repeat really the measurements or the readout many times in order to really estimate properties of value for chemistry or for materials. So actually sufficient statistics and therefore really counting how many measurements you need to do is a blocker today. And it's a blocker, by the way, which depends on the physical implementation, on the physical platforms. Sorry, I clicked too early. Then initializing the correct quantum computing state. So what is the algorithms that allows to mimic in the best possible manner the molecular state and transfer it into the quantum computer? This is a problem that is important both now and for fault-tolerant algorithms. Importantly, for quantum advantage, comparison with classical methods. If you want to claim quantum advantage, it means that you are comparing, maybe in some variables, it could be energy, could be time, it depends, but you are comparing and hoping to beat all the other alternative classical techniques. So you have to have the best competing classical techniques, either in-house or work together with whom has these techniques. Benchmarking. How can we trust quantum computer at the quantum advantage level when there will be, or in quantum advantage regime, when of course there will be no comparison by definition? And then, of course, if you think in terms of scientific quantum advantage, you have physical meaning, okay? You want to prove that maybe for some application that is only scientifically useful, in physics, for example, in condensed matter physics, you want to prove that actually this gives you answers that are not possible with any other method. But you want to do it in a way or for an application that is physically meaningful, right? So this is another important point you want to add. And then you have extrapolation or signal strength. So this is a very technical thing. If the signal decays very quickly from your quantum computer, there is very little hope of proving any quantum advantage because it will be hard to measure. But also, if you're studying a scientific example which is in a way predictable from a finite size scaling. So if you know that in the regime where it's simulable, you have an answer and you just need to extrapolate, then maybe it's not so relevant to have a quantum advantage case, just because in principle, even if you can't practically do the calculations, you would be able to guess it from finite size scaling. So this is just a way of going through a number of subtleties which are not only hardware related. They are algorithm related, they are software related, they are theory related. There is a lot more that has to go hand in hand with hardware in order to talk about quantum advantage and in order to operate a technology which is truly disruptive. That is exactly what we want, right? So now let me just very briefly, if you want, advertise a paper that I like very much. It's a paper that Algorithmiq coordinated, but is authored by many scientists from many companies, from many institutions. It's a paper about resource estimates. And this is a paper that tried to assess, actually, beyond what was considered perhaps what is a myth, what are in the near term, the resource estimates to move towards quantum advantage, if it is possible, before full fault tolerance, or also in the early fault tolerance regime. It is important, it's an exercise that must be done really to assess the applications, use cases, and of course also the algorithms and the potential of a given technology. What we do at Algorithmiq is developing products that are both lowering the stack, the digital quantum interface, that is more really across verticals, but also applications in chemistry, healthcare, and life sciences. And I will present two use cases, and I will focus on, later on the specifically on the healthcare and life sciences. So the two need to be co-designed and co-optimized in order to reach really high applications levels. So let me start with an error mitigation. This is a use case of the digital quantum interface. So it's an error mitigation method that we have been working on. This is a demonstration on an IBM hardware together with the researchers of Trinity College Dublin. And what you see here, very simply, is a signal that as a function of the circuit depth, decays wrongly, so it gives the wrong result, and that error mitigation can push back towards the correct targeted result. What is interesting here is that is an example where there is an interesting physical understanding of quantum chaos that provides also new insight in the physics. It is massive, 91 active qubits, 91 entangled layers, more than 4,000 entangling gates. It's a massive undertaking. This error mitigation technique that we use fully in post-processing allows also to reduce the time and speed to operate the whole time of the algorithm. So it's 500 times faster than competing methods, and it's also optimal in what it really entails the minimum so-called sampling overhead for these techniques. Now, this is one example that is across verticals. It's not specific to healthcare and chemistry and material. So let me go now to the second example. By the way, sorry, I forgot to mention, it's already available commercially. It's one of the Qiskit functions. You can just access it via Qiskit. So let me go now to the second example. And the second example is an application in photodynamic therapy. So this is now more healthcare and life sciences. And in particular, it's an application that we have developed as part of the Wellcome Leap Q4Bio program together with IBM and Cleveland Clinic. The problem in this case came, of course, from our collaborators at Cleveland Clinic, medical doctors and bioengineers, who came to us with the problem that to really optimize this alternative, or if you want, the photosensitizer, so the molecule that is ingested by the patient and then activated by light in order to kill cancer cells, to optimize it, it's hard to do this operation by using classical pipelines. So this was a problem that obviously was of interest because it's an alternative therapy which has almost no side effects, and that really poses a challenge since the process of interaction of light with the molecule is a process that is fundamentally quantum. So we thought, well, quantum computers seem to be ideal in order to mimic and therefore simulate this process and optimize the property of the photosensitizers. It's important also to notice that for photodynamic therapy, there is really no classical computational pipeline. So here you see a standard drug discovery pipeline, and what we proposed, that is integrating quantum computers and machine learning and HPC, is an alternative classical pipeline, not an alternative because there is currently none, but it's a potential in silico pipeline that would allow, of course, to speed up time and the time and reduce the costs to bring the drug to market. And of course, this pipeline is not just for photodynamic therapy, but can be used in a number of other applications. These are some of the use cases that at Algorithmiq we have been working on and we are also working on. So now, this is the complexity and the level of complexity. In the remaining few minutes, I will go through these points. And I will start by telling that the molecule that we simulate is this one. Now, this molecule is not lithium hydrates or water. This is a molecule that is currently in phase 2 clinical trial, so it's a complex molecule. The way in which we operate to simulate and optimize this property is complex. We start from really, first of all, understanding and modeling what is the environment of the molecule. They don't exist in isolation, through embedding techniques. Then we have to select that part of the molecule that actually counts, so the so-called active space, that is the most difficult to simulate, with the classical techniques. And then we have an exciting algorithm where we map the state of the molecule into a circuit that is then run in the quantum computer, measured to our proprietary informationally complete measurement technique that is very different from the standard one, and then mitigated, and finally you extract the molecular properties that are then used for doing accurate molecular dynamics. Okay, so this is the whole pipeline. Now, in the remaining time, 3 main points. We are extremely excited about these new algorithms that we have discovered very recently. We have put this paper in the archive. It's a simulation of fermionic circuits using Majorana propagation techniques. Why this is exciting? Because now, and in the fault-tolerant era, now and when you can use quantum phase estimation, okay, that is a typical fault-tolerant method. You will need to accurately initialize the quantum computer in the right molecular state. And to do so, this method is ideal because it allows to simulate classically in pre-processing electronic structure problems, fermionic problems, really, really accurately. Look at the difference between our method, here is still called quickest, now it's Majorana propagator, never mind. Look at the estimates for 28, 40, and 52 qubits, and the comparison with Kisk's state vector and with Q2Q, either state vector or MPS, even using GPUs. I mean, you see that the difference is dramatic. There is no way of doing this with 52 qubits. So with 52 qubits, there is no other way for the same level of accuracy, obviously, that you want to obtain to estimate the ground state energy and to generate the circuit. There is no other way of doing it other than using this technique. Okay? So this is particularly exciting because it allows us to do something that was impossible before. Remember, I mentioned removing the blockers, removing the key blockers. This was a key blocker. It is not a key blocker anymore. Then the second thing is the error mitigation, and I will not describe it in detail. It's a method that basically enhances via the quantum computer a very well-known quantum chemistry method that is known as DMRG. So it's a quantum-boosted DMRG. It has performance guarantees. This means that in the worst case, if the quantum computer gives you a random number, in the worst case, you obtain the same solution that you would obtain with the MRG. So it's strictly better than the MRG, and the improvement is given precisely by the quantum computer. And what is truly important here is that the full problem, using the MRG classically scales exponentially, while using our method scales polynomially. This is a log-log scale, that's why you see this is a polynomial scaling. So we have clearly an example of an advantage for an important quantum chemistry method in the pipeline that I described before, and therefore it is meaningful to treat this problem using a quantum computer. And this is very important before even thinking of using a quantum computer for any problems in this case. And finally, the way of measuring, we have a proprietary way of measuring that compared to the standard way of measuring offers tremendous boosts, okay? This is the number of shots required. If I stop at 40 qubits, then it's 9 orders of magnitude more, but if I go up to 100 qubits, it's 18 orders of magnitude more. I mean, reduction. So this means that you really go in a regimes of the millions of shots or 10 millions of shots, which is doable with superconducting qubit. It is not with other techniques, and we have other methods for other platforms, so this is actually something which is reachable. So you go from impossible to possible using these techniques. And soon this will be, so the backbone of this algorithm will be available as a quantum chemistry application in Qiskit function in Q3. I conclude with the team. This was most of what I wanted to say. So the team is everything. Co-founders and the team are here. And I finish with the same questions that I asked at the very beginning, and thinking that I would be very curious to know what are the sets of questions we have to ask in order to specify or to answer to these other questions that is more general. Thank you very much for listening.